Well, let's go ahead and get started. So welcome, everybody. This session today is on grant writing, and we're going to start off with David Holmes, who's responsible for the regional education for Candid. And I'm going to just turn it over to him.
All right. Thank you, Anita. Welcome, everybody. My name is Dave Holmes. I am the Educational Programming Manager for an organization called Candid. And if you don't know what Candid is, and this is me and my email address, by the way, if you don't know what Candid is, we are a national nonprofit, and we started as two other nonprofits. We joined forces 5 years ago. One of those nonprofits was Foundation Center, which had been around from the 50s, collecting information on grant making and how to write grants and how to find funding. And we combined 5 years ago with another organization called GuideStar. GuideStar had been around since the 70s, collecting information on the world of nonprofits and making that available usually to private givers and funders that were doing the research. So together, what we try to do is show the entire world of funding and fundraising and nonprofits and funders so that you can get the information you need to do good. We have a lot of different resources on our website, candid.org. I'm going to show a couple of them today. But mainly what this is material that will help you with what Anita's going to talk about in grant writing. So if you want to learn additional information, you can go to our candid.org website. We also have a bunch of partners throughout the country, and I'll mention where those are in just a second. But what I want to tell you about is a place to find grant opportunities. What Anita's going to talk about is the making connections and writing to funders and asking for money. But the tool that we use and the tool that we publish is called Foundation Directory. And I'm going to stop sharing my slides just for a second to show this to you. This is a tool that is not free from home. You can subscribe to it, but I wanted to tell you that it is free at all of our partners. And I'll tell you where those partners are after I show this to you just real briefly. But Foundation Directory lists over 240,000 grant makers from all across the world that you can search to find a match with based on your nonprofit. So you go into Foundation Directory, it looks like this, no matter where you go, and you click on Advanced Search, because I like to do it in the fancy way. And then you choose the terms that will describe what you're doing. So I'm going to say youth development, that's the subject. Geographic focus is where you serve. And so I'm going to say Cuyahoga County. You can also put in, if you want, a specific population or additional searches that will work to try and help you find a match. But essentially, what you do and where you do it is all you need to do to search and find potential funders. Once you do that, you get a list of grants and grant makers, and there are 955 grant makers listed that have given a grant for youth development in Cuyahoga County since 2003. This list here that you see in front of you of grant makers, it's the first 5 of them. The top 5 are the ones that have given the most grants, not the most amount, but the most grants towards that particular subject in Cuyahoga County. Each one of these is a profile of a funder. So when we talk and when Anita goes into details about writing your proposal and following the guidelines, this is where you can find which funders to approach and where to get their guidelines. So you'll get a link to their website if they have one. A lot don't. And then there's more detail on what they give and where they give, some details on actual grants that they have awarded for youth development in the last few years. And then further down, more about their purpose and mission, their background, how to apply to them, what they don't fund, more about their financials, who's running that organization and who you can connect with, and then finally, contact information for all of the different funders. You can use this and email this information to yourself or save it to a desktop, however you want to use it. This is a really quick guide to it, but rest assured that if you go to Candid website, candid.org, and go to Candid Learning, which is our training stuff, you will see a full class on this for free if you want to learn it. I'm just going to share a couple more slides for you because I want you to know about where you can access our information. I mentioned that this tool is not free from home. However, it is free at about 1,600 locations in the United States and Mexico. So, for example, if you're in Cleveland, it's free at the Cleveland Public Library. It's free at Westlake Porter Public Library. It's free at Cleveland Heights Library. There are 1,600 locations. A lot of the times they are branches of one library system, but you will find a location probably not far from where you are by using the candid.org/find us search. The other things that we do, I can't go through all of them because I'm doing this as a little intro for this session. But if you ever want to do more about sharing information about your organization, guidestar.org, which I mentioned earlier, is a place that lists the nonprofit profiles of every nonprofit in the United States, every 501c3 charity. And if you think, well, I'm not on there, and you're a nonprofit, you are already on there if you're registered with the IRS. You go to guidestar.org, you can update your information, earn seals of transparency, by which we mean you share additional information. And you can find out lots more about it by going to help.candid.org/s to find information on claiming your profile on guidestar.org, updating it, and earning seals of transparency. Very happy to be here with you. If you want to learn more about us, you can join our newsletter. You can also send me an email, david.holmes@candid.org. I'm going to stop
Okay,
sharing this.
there are a couple questions.
Yeah,
You'd
I can
like to
certainly
take them?
respond to those. Are these
Okay.
resources available internationally? Absolutely. Anyone
Yeah.
can make use of this. We don't have partners in other countries where you can use the foundation directory for free, except Mexico. But if you're wondering about doing international grant seeking, you can certainly subscribe. And much of what's on our candid.org website, including nearly all of our trainings, are totally free for anyone. And yes, Foundation Directory is a paid subscription from home, but it is freely available at other locations. I don't have permission to share my email address in the chat. So it may be, Anita, if you want to put
Yeah, I
that in.
can.
Are these funders who award grants for profit as well? Well, I think Anita might go into detail about that, but for the most part, private foundations do not award to for-profit organizations unless you are partnering with an existing nonprofit. And thank you. It's I'm sorry, there's no M in that, Anita. It's
Oh,
just
okay.
david.holmes@candid.org.
Okay.
So,
Just David Holmes.
david.holmes@candid.org.
Okay. I will put
And
it
Anita
there.
is putting the corrected address in there for me. If you wanted to learn more about what we do, please do visit candid.org and look for the Candid Learning section because you'll find lots and lots of information, or just send me a message if you have any questions. It's been my pleasure to see you today. There's one more question. I wanted to hire a 1099 grant writer to research and find funding for my NPO. What is a common form of compensation? Oh, that's a little bit complicated for this forum, but I'll just say that in general, they are paid by the hour, and it's anywhere from, I've seen grant writers working for as little as $25 an hour to grant writers that regularly work for over $200 an hour. So get references and talk to somebody. In working with foundations, do we necessarily need to write grants to be awarded money? In general, you do have to write a request because some funders do reach out to nonprofits they're aware of. They do the research themselves, but the vast majority of the ones that are listed in our database and the big ones that you see have a request process. They publish guidelines. They look for requests coming from people that want funding. And that's a great place to turn back over to Anita. She's going to talk about grant writing, and I'm going to leave you guys. So thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you so much, David. And we will see you again.
Yes. And yeah, if you missed anything I said, it's going to be on the recording. So thank you.
Yes, they will get the recording. Okay, so let's get started with grant writing basics. And first, I want to tell you a little bit about SCORE. For those of you who may not know, SCORE is a nonprofit, and we do get funding from a lot of different sources. We have the largest network of free volunteer small business mentors in the nation. And I emphasize free because there are a lot of paid volunteer or paid non-volunteer mentors that are available to you as well. So no matter what stage your business is, we can find a mentor for you. Since the pandemic, we've been doing most of our work online, but it has opened up to us the mentors at the 250 chapters across the United States. So if you have an unusual type of business and we don't have a mentor in our office, we can go online and find a mentor somewhere in the United States to help you. So it's very easy to request a mentor. If you go to our website, there are a couple of different options. And if you do, I'd suggest that you try to give us as much information as possible about your business so that we can match you up with a mentor that has the same type of background. So there we go. Okay, our mission is to foster, excuse me, vibrant small businesses. We do this through mentoring and education. We hope that you as a small business owner will get all the resources that you need to be successful. Small businesses make up over 95% of all businesses, so they're critical to the success of our economy, and certainly in the Cleveland area, we're well aware of that. This is a snapshot of our accomplishments in 2023. We helped about 30,000 new businesses and about 152 new jobs. We have all types of people in our client base. About 10% are veterans, and in the neighborhood of 60% are women. We have a code of ethics specifically to protect your data, to make sure that none of our members want to make money from your client information. We use our database only for our internal use and to assist you in your businesses. So it's all confidential. Anything you tell your mentor will be protected. This is a snapshot of our website. You can see if you click here, you can find a local mentor. There are workshops, both what's coming up live and a list of all of our recorded webinars, which probably are close to 100 at this time. So if you see a webinar that you're not able to attend, if you go to our website, you may very well find it in the recorded webinars. There are a lot of other types of resources, templates. If you are interested in a business plan, a financial plan, marketing plan, there are templates on our website that are available to you. Okay, I don't want to do that. Oops. Okay, so let's go to grant writing basics. Give me a minute here. For some reason, I'm having a little problem. I guess it doesn't want to start. Okay. So we're going to be talking about grant writing, and hopefully by the end of the session, you'll know where to find opportunities. You'll know how to determine your eligibility for the grants, and understand how to approach writing a grants, and what's included in your application. There are, as David pointed out, they have a database that is a phenomenal resource if you're looking for grant information. But you might also find your board members are familiar with organizations that give grants. They may have contacts that will help you access the grant. So do check with your board members. Doing a Google search. Now, there are a number, particularly if you're a for-profit, there are a number of organizations, companies that do give small grants to for-profit organizations, but you'll generally only find them on Google. So particularly, there's the Amber grant, there are specific grants for women, specific grants for minority. You also would look at the foundations of local organizations, particularly banks and other companies in the area and in the region. As I said, Candid is a phenomenal resource when it comes to grants, particularly private grants. And the federal government, www.grants.gov, represents 26 different government agencies that give grants. So let me try again and see if I can start the slideshow. Not gonna start. Okay. As far as the state of Ohio, there are some grants or low interest rate loans. This is a link to the state. This is a link for the city of Cleveland and for Cuyahoga County. So there are really two keys to eligibility. If you're looking at federal grants, you do have to register through SAM. You have to go on there and get your unique entity identifier that you will use no matter any organization in the federal government that will give you access. But if you're looking at private foundations, most of the time they will let you know in their application whether you're eligible or not. So legally speaking, many, and again, we're talking definitely about federal grants, but also many private grants will tell you very clearly what size and type of organization. Some are require just small businesses, which means less than 500 million. And they may also, particularly on the federal grants, tell you what organizations are not eligible. Most of the local funding requires 501c3, and that's because companies are required to set aside a certain percentage of their revenue to fund grants. But in order for them to get credit for it, you have to be a 501c3. So they probably aren't going to give you money if you're not registered with the IRS. Again, most are not going to fund startups. unless they're specifically asking for a new program. And if you think about it, you know, if you're a granting agency and you said, well, we want to fund organizations that support youth development. If it's a startup, you really don't know what their success is, what their rate of success is, whether they're going to be a sustainable organization. So you want to give your money to an organization that's well established, has good financial systems to provide adequate reporting. So if you think about it, it kind of makes sense that they don't really want to fund startups. So if you don't meet the eligibility requirements that are stated in the application, it's not worth even trying to apply. They won't accept your application. Now, for all the federal funds and for many of the private foundations, they give you contact information. So if you have a question, call up that person. You know, they're more than happy to give you information and to help you as much as possible. So again, before you apply, they really are interested in your track record. Many organizations, particularly the federal government, generally wants you to be in business for 3 years, unless you have audited financials for a shorter period of time. They want to know what you have accomplished. What are your key performance measures? And I will tell you, if you're even if you're a for-profit organization, you should have identified what are those key things that measure your success. And you should have at least 2 or 3 significant measures where you can say, here's what we've accomplished over the past, here's what we intend to do in the future. So if you don't have those performance measures established, start now and do it, because you are going to have to show that you can be successful. They also want the specifics of how you're going to use the money. So you need to have your budget well defined. And so again, if you have a good business plan, which a SCORE mentor can help you with, a lot of this will be very easy when it comes to applying for grants. So you want to have your business plan available. Again, you can do a lot of cutting and pasting. Only apply for funds that support your strategic and business plans. So if you see an opportunity that's not quite in your mission, I would not recommend that you try to change your organization to fit the grant. It's not a smart move. And if you're not doing something that fulfills your mission, you're really being a disservice to your organization. So if you look at private foundations, they generally have specific funding initiatives. And so if your grant is consistent within that funding initiative, they will accept the application. If you only have a one-time project and they aren't willing to fund a grant, they might give you a one-time charitable donation. So that's, you know, if you just have a small project, it's a little bit easier to get a charitable donation because it's a one-time thing. They're not as concerned. If they fund a grant, some organizations are concerned that you're going to be too dependent on their grant and they don't want to fund for a long term. They may fund as much as 2 or 3 years, but they don't want to fund you forever. So again, they have specific objectives that they want to support in the community. Many times it's serving low-income demographics, economic development, educational opportunities. So if you have a project that fits within one of those general topics, you should be okay to apply. This I copied specifically from a foundation website here in Cleveland. They're saying their focus is on neighbors, education, workforce, with an emphasis on racial, economic, and environmental equity. So if you have a project for a specific neighborhood, if you have an educational project, or if you have a project that generates jobs, those would all fall within that scope. And again, they want the tax deduction for supporting your organization. So they want you to be a 501c3. And again, you also have to be in the United States. So the content of the application generally includes a mission statement, a background summary, and statement of need. And this is an example of a good background statement. It's an organization dedicated to providing support for at-risk teenage girls. It talks about what kind of environment, what they do offer, what their program offers, and so forth. And then it says we are requesting funds to expand our physical facilities to accommodate a 25% increase in the number of young women we are able to support. So it's pretty straightforward, but it has a lot of information in this background statement that makes it pretty easy for the granting organization to understand what they're trying to do. So you want to include the title of your project. What is your funding request? What type of support are you asking for? And a description of your project. So for this project, for instance, they're requesting $150,000, and they break it down into these sections. Now you will find that some granting organizations will not support operations. They will only support program. And maybe some will and some will not support capital. So when you look at the grant application, make sure that you understand what they're willing to fund. Now, sometimes, as far as operations are concerned, if the program project can include operational elements as part of the program. So say if you have a manager who directs the program, that can be included in the program costs. So you need to, again, tease out what's going to work best for your application. And then you can upload a file. So basically, if you have a good description of your project in your business plan, you can just upload it. And then they want to know when you're starting and when you're ending. So within the application, these are the kinds of questions that you will need to ask or answer. Where will the services be provided? What individuals are you serving, and what's the number? Of course, the more impact you have, the more numbers you serve, the more likely you are to be funded. They want you to upload the detail of your budget and exactly how you're going to use the funds. Private grants are generally not as detailed as far as the budget is concerned as government grants. They will say you can put generally how much money you're paying for salaries, how much you're paying for equipment, supplies in aggregate, but you don't usually have to detail every single thing. They also want to know what other organizations are providing funds for your project. The reason they want is, again, they don't want you to be totally dependent on their funding so that when they take it away, your business is going to collapse. They want you to have other sources of funds that will support you if their grant doesn't continue beyond a certain time period. So again, if you have a good business plan, those will be relatively simple questions for you to answer. Now, again, many local and regional granting organizations will only support a particular geographic region. Again, they want to know the ethnicity and the gender of people that you serve. Are you serving individuals with disabilities, disadvantaged, homeless, etc.? So you can be very explicit about your demographics and your impact, because those are going to be important issues that they will view in order to assure that you are supporting their funding initiatives. They want to know, again, what's the current health status of your organization? So do you have paid staff? Are they all volunteers? Do you have an organization? And they might want to have you upload your organization chart. So they want to know that there's more than one person who's trying to run an organization. They'll want to know, they want your mission statement regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you don't have a plan, do you have plans to implement it? Do you have an environmental sustainability strategy? What are you doing for climate change? And I know these all seem a little off the wall, but I took these specifically from an application from a local organization. So you need to be prepared for these kinds of questions that you might have to answer. And then they usually want a list of your board and staff members, your IRS determination letter, and your most recent audited financials. If you don't have them, they might ask you for your tax. So anyway, so those are the general elements of a private foundation application. So if we talk about government grants, on the other hand, and the main difference between private grants and government grants, if you notice on the private grants, they have funding initiatives. So they're general. So we'll fund community support for job growth. We'll fund education which is a very broad topic. On the other hand, when you come to government grants, the government is looking for specific programs. They design the programs. They get together and they say, here's what we want to implement as a program. And they're asking you to apply by showing that you can do that program. So it's not your program that you're designing. It's a program the government is designing and asking you to implement it. So that's not a subtle difference. That's a significant difference. So when you go to grants.gov and you put in keywords, you'll get a huge list of possible grants, and you'll have to go through them and pick out the ones that you think are relative for your organization, and then read through the announcements. And the announcements are generally pretty long, very detailed, and very descriptive of what they want. So they first start out with the eligibility requirements. So you want to make sure that you are eligible. Then you want to read the program announcement, the request for proposals, and ask yourself, can your organization accomplish the program that's described in the announcement? So is it worth your effort? If you think about the program, do I have staff available or do I have to hire people? Do we have the equipment and supplies necessary? Do we have the experience? So if not, it's hard to bring up all those things in order to meet the needs of the program. You want to make sure that you have a very robust financial infrastructure because the government requires very detailed financial reporting. And grants are tough. There's a lot of competition. And very often you'll find if you submit the same grant application 2 or 3 times, it might eventually be funded. So you've decided that you're going to write a proposal. Then you need to figure out how are you going to implement the project, and of course, how are you going to measure the quality of your work? So what are the goals of the funding agency? Because they very clearly list what their goals are in implementing this program. Can you meet the deadline for submission? Sometimes it's relatively short. And is a letter of intent required? It will tell you in the request for proposals what they want to include in the letter of intent. The reason they're asking for the letter of intent is because they want to know how many applications they're going to receive so they can set up their reviewing system. If it's a government grant, generally there's a fairly large group of people reviewing various parts of the grant, and they want to know how many of those people do we need to organize to get the proposal reviewed properly. And some organizations will only allow you to submit an application if they approve your letter of intent. And in a way, that's a good thing because it saves you the time and effort of putting in an application when they obviously know they're not going to fund it. So what goes in the federal application? Again, if you have a good business plan, you can cut and paste appropriate sections because they do want the description of your organization. What are your past performance statistics? They'll want job descriptions. They want very detailed financial data. So the granting agency wants to know your goals and objectives for this particular program, and are they aligned with the agency objectives? What are you going to do to satisfy the request? How are you going to carry it out? What's going to be the impact? what resources are available, and what the budget is. So when you outline the objectives of your grant from the announcements, and what I generally do is actually take the objectives of the grant announcement and make sure that my objectives are aligned and consistent with their objectives. So the grant announcement, again, will state the objectives, and I am using just example of a grant that I did some time ago to support the access of low income or disadvantaged women to high quality screening for breast, cervical, and ovarian cancer. They want to assure early detection, and they also want to educate these people in prevention, treatment, and follow-up. So, state my purpose, objectives, or specific aims. This is what I'm going to do to respond to the objectives of the grant. And again, if you can specifically relate each of your objectives to those that are stated in the announcement, it's a lot easier for the reviewers to approve the application. So if you recall, their objective was to improve access to screening for breast, cervical, and ovarian cancer. I'm saying this is my objective by establishing a mobile screening van that will visit areas where low income or disadvantaged women reside. And the van will contain all the equipment needed for screening. And we're going to schedule the visits to coincide with the convenience of the local residents. So we're going to make an effort to figure out what's the best time to be bringing that van into the neighborhood to capture the most of the clients. To raise awareness of the need for screening, we're going to use newspaper, radio, TV, public service announcements, social media channels, distribution of flyers. So we'll do all those things. So we'll be distributing flyers, we'll be making PSAs for radio and TV, and so forth. And then to educate women, we're going to present local workshops and seminars that give them information on treatment, follow-up, and prevention. So also think about if you're putting together a response to a federal program, and it may not get funded, you might also submit it to a local private foundation that has, again, support for healthcare for low-income individuals. So how are you going to carry out the program? And this is going to be the bulk of your application. So you want to think about what are the specific tasks involved? Do you have staff to carry them out? Can you demonstrate that you understand the work involved? You want to give them statistics on what you've been doing, what your successes are that are particularly related to the program that they have in mind. So again, as I said, private applications generally require much less detail. But one of the things, and I used to do reviews for the National Institute of Health, one of the concerns of people who did reviews was there's not enough detail. It's not clear that these people really understand what they have to do in order to implement the program. So again, detail is very important. So for our project, again, we're going to screen, treat, and educate low-income disadvantaged women. What kind of equipment and materials do I need? Do they need to be developed? How am I going to do it? Who's going to do it? When are they going to do it? How are they going to do it? How will I recruit clients? So I need detail. I said generally I'm going to do, TV, radio, social media, etc., but they want more detail. So, and then who will present the materials? So if I'm going to be educating people, who's going to actually present that? Do I have staff? Do I need to hire people? Do I need to hire somebody to develop the content? So all of these things I need to think about, because if I'm going to support this kind of a program, I need to know how many staff do I need to add staff people? What's my budget for this project? Do I need any new equipment? Obviously, I need a van. So again, there are a lot of things you have to think about. If you have to recruit and train staff, what I have done in the past when I put in an application is interview people who would fill that position and then agree to hire them if the grant is funded. That way, if we get the grant and get the funds, then that somebody can be hired quickly and we can get the project started right away. If you wait until you know whether it's going to be funded, it may take you 6 months to hire somebody, and then you're going to be that far behind in starting the project. So if you're going to do training, how are you going to do it? Now, we probably could do most of it either locally where we take the van, or we can try doing it online for those people who have access to online facilities. So what are the costs involved? It may be having a Zoom account. It might be renting a space in a local library, so forth. So all of those things need to be thought about and taken into consideration, so you're budgeting what you need. And then how long is it going to take? Usually they will tell you how long they're willing to fund it. So maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years, maximum 5 years. So you want to make sure that you can do the project within the time frame that they provide funding. If you can't, how are you going to continue the project? And then how are you going to measure success? So for my application, I said we're going to measure the increase in screening numbers. We're going to measure the increase in early detection, and we're going to measure the improvement in disease-free longevity. All of those things will be impacted by this project. So budgeting is really critical. And one of the things I would caution you, if you're applying for a grant, they may tell you the maximum amount of money available. Do not think that if you come in with the cheapest, lowest cost, that you are more likely to be funded. In general, particularly for federal grants, the people who review it don't decide on the budget. They will review the budget and evaluate whether it's appropriate or not, but they won't say this is how much money you should get. They're really looking to see, are you supporting the program that you're putting in place? So you want to list all of the people in the project, their time allocation, their salaries, and you can increase, if you, at least the cost of living increase every year. What I've done when I apply for a grant, I use the job description for justification. And then I list all the equipment and supplies that will be utilized for the project. So also, if you are paying for a facility where this is going to be done, you want to list that cost. Will it be necessary to travel? If it is, you want to either include mileage, meals, airfare, those types of things, including maintenance costs. If you have equipment, say we're going to have a van, so we need some maintenance costs. It's important to make sure that you include everything. Usually the government now pays you a certain amount for travel. If you're doing, say we take the van and we go into the neighborhoods, we can charge them a per mile fee. So that would be part of our application. For each budget item, you really have to provide a justification. As I said, for personnel, a job description related to the project is usually adequate. And so they'll give you budget sheets that you'll need to fill out. And usually it will be the person, their salary and benefits. Don't forget the benefits. How many months are they going to be working on it every year, and what their total salary is. And then writing the justification, we're going to say, well, John is going to be the project leader. These are all the things that he's going to do. He'll oversee the daily operations and assure that the project remains on schedule. His qualifications are that he has an MBA with 15 years experience managing a similar project. Ms. Smith is going to be the van screening process. She'll manage the technicians and other personnel and so forth. So this is what you would need to do for every person who's involved in the project. So, and somebody asked about a grant writer. Grant writers can be an asset because they've experience in writing the application. The downside is they probably don't know much of anything about your organization, so you're going to have to provide all that information. Again, they charge generally by the hour, so it could be expensive, and you can't charge that as part of your grant costs. And anything they write, you must take responsibility for. So if you have a grant writer, and I would say for local grants, which are relatively small in the neighborhood, probably $25,000 or less, their applications are very straightforward. If you have a business plan, it's very simple to cut and paste, and I would encourage you to try to do that yourself rather than hiring somebody to do it. Again, you're the one who has the passion for your business. You can make your story probably more compelling than anyone else. Again, you can use your business plan You want to run it through a grammar and spelling. Now we have all these AI tools that you can use. You want to check your budget figures and make sure you've got the formatting and length. Almost every application these days is going to be online. They will limit you to the number of words, the number of pages, etc. But a lot of times they'll let you upload appendices. So you could put, say, more detail in specific things. You could put actually resumes as an appendix. So again, you can get more information in there sometimes if they allow those things. So again, if you want to think about a grant writer, again, I encourage people to learn how to write grants themselves. Candid actually has classes on grant writing. So if you're thinking, and again, if you're a nonprofit and you're thinking about supporting yourself with grants over a period of time, I would encourage you very strongly to learn how to write them yourself. Again, you know the organization, and you can ask other people in the organization to write parts of the grant. They know how and what you can do and what you can measure. And the other hand, of course, if you've got in-house people writing grant applications, it does take them away from other work that they might be scheduled to do. So know who's going to be evaluating your application. The government agencies publish the review committees. Foundations might have review committees. A lot of times it's a person or a very small committee, and they don't tell you who does it. But again, put yourself in the place of the reviewer. What would you be looking for? Again, the easier it is for the reviewer to see that your proposal aligns with the goals of the agency, the better able they'll be able to rate it. So you want to be realistic. You want to be organized. You want to be clear and concise. Again, they're going to limit how much space you have. And you're selling your idea on paper. So you want them to be able to understand what you're trying to do and what your business is all about. Have other people review it because you are very invested. You know your organization very well. Make sure that someone who is not that familiar can read it and understand what you're trying to do. So the format would generally be included in the application. And again, use them exactly the way they tell them. If there's a page limit, make sure you adhere to it. If they require things to be submitted, make sure that you submit them. And I would really encourage you to try to beat the deadline. So many things happen at the last minute, and you don't want to be caught submitting late and therefore not being considered. If you have questions, you want to contact the program director. Again, be accurate. Don't use a lot of jargon. If you're working with other organizations to complete the project, include letters of support from the principals involved. This is really important. It makes a big difference. If you're collaborating with another organization, have them write you a letter and say, we are delighted to be part of your application. Here's what we're going to do. and we're looking forward to working on this project with you. It makes a big difference if you include those. As far as the grant making cycle, again, the agencies or foundation determine what their requirements are going to be. Once they publish an announcement, you file your application, the awards are announced, and then your funding is initiated. The link or the lag between when you submit and when you get funded are significantly different. If it's government, it usually takes 10 months. If it's private grants, it can be anywhere from 1 month to 6 months, but usually not nearly as long. The process for government grant review is much more involved and detailed, but the positive thing is they give you the reviewer's comments. So if you put in an application and it's not funded, you'll get the comments from the reviewers that will help you revise the application. And I would encourage you then to submit it in the next cycle, and you have a better chance of being approved because you have addressed the issues that the reviewers commented on. These are the review criteria that are used by the government, and you can review as your leisure. So it's not uncommon, particularly with government grants, but local ones as well, to have to submit it 2 or 3 times before you get funded. So don't give up, don't be discouraged. One of my clients submitted a grant locally and was told by one of the members of the review committee that we never grant funds with the first application. So keep that in mind. It's very likely if you keep trying that you're going to eventually get funded. Okay, so let's see if there are any. Let me stop sharing here. And let's look at. Okay. I think David answered this. In working with foundations, do we necessarily need to write grants? You need to write an application, and that comes down to a grant application. So yes, that is absolutely critical. Yes, the UEI is definitely anybody who registers in SAM will get their unique identification number. But again, you use that from then on for any application or any interaction with the government. So you only have to do that once. Again, you will be getting a copy of the slides and a link to the recording, probably tomorrow or the next day. And okay. Okay, so based on David's comments that candid.org would be the great one to search, or grants.gov if you want to do. Actually, how to become a grant reviewer. If you have expertise and have been, have received grants from a particular organization, I would say I know working for the NIH, the reason that I became a grant reviewer is because they asked me, because I worked for organizations that had received government grants in that area, and my expertise then would allow me to evaluate what the application entails. And so, they asked me to review. I did not apply. So I don't think that there's a way to become a reviewer unless if it's a local and people in the organization, you might think to contact them and say, I have expertise in this area. If you need somebody to review grants, I would be happy to do that. So, but normally it's because you requested. Okay, we provide online education and recreational programs for individuals with developmental disabilities. The grant application asks for the number of people we will impact and break down by location. We are open to everyone and do not have a screening process. I guess to complete that application, what you would do is identify what you have done in the past. How many clients, what the demographics were, and indicate that that's what you would be doing in the future, unless you particularly intend to target a particular group of people. If you haven't been keeping track, then I think you're kind of in trouble unless there's a way you can go back and take a look at the clients that you've had and how you've interacted with them. So I think, again, looking for private grants, try candid.org. For clarity, government grants are only granted if you are willing to implement their developed program. That is correct. Again, different from private grants, the folks get together and say, look, here's what we want to implement, because they generally have a research question that they want to answer. And they figure, here's a program we can set up that will answer that question. So we need somebody who's willing to do that program. So it's unlikely that they're just going to let you develop your own program. Now, a difference might be the Small Business Innovative Research Grants, the SBIR grants, which are granted often to either nonprofits or for-profits. But it's because they're looking at a particular technology that the organization has developed, and they're helping it to bring it to market. So if you have a technology that you are working on in the developmental stage, you could apply for a phase 1 SBIR grant. And if you're successful in bringing that development to a point where it's ready to go to market, you can apply for the SBIR 2 grant, and that will then help you commercialize it. And generally, then you would be working with a company that has that experience. I hope that answers your question. Okay, so I think we're done. I hope that you have found it worthwhile, and I appreciate that you have been. Does that mean that part of the grant goes to your personal pay, or the government grants? Okay, so again, they're looking at program. Now, if my salary or my time and effort goes into the program, then that part of my salary can be paid by the grant. So that's how it works. If I'm, say I have an organization and I'm wanting to apply, but I'm not spending any time on that program, I have somebody else who's heading up the program, their salary would go into the grant, but mine wouldn't. So that's how it works. And again, if you have people who are working, like when we did the grant application for the screening, we had a mobile van, we had a nurse who was in charge of the van. We had 3 different technicians that worked with the screening equipment. And all of their salaries were included in the grant. So again, it's when they say they don't want to pay for operations, that doesn't mean, or when they say program costs, it doesn't mean just equipment and supplies and stuff. It also means the salaries of the people who are involved in the program. I hope that's clear. Okay, so I think, no, SAM does not require a registration fee. So it's free. They just require a lot of information. But yes, it is free. So I think I have gotten all the questions. If you have any other questions, you can feel free to email me or David. I'm just putting my email address in the chat. Okay. And again, if you have any questions for either of us, feel free to email. And so I hope you have a good